Welcome, gentle listeners, to our journey through time. Tonight, we traverse the elegant yet unforgiving landscape of feudal Japan, a realm where samurai honor and strict social codes ruled with the sharpness of a katana blade. Beneath the serene beauty of cherry blossoms and poetic tradition lies a daily existence so demanding it would leave most modern souls exhausted before midday. If you're finding value in these historical journeys, please consider showing your support with a like and subscription, but only if my storytelling truly resonates with you. I'm always curious about my global audience, so please share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim your lights. Perhaps activate a gentle fan for that soothing background ambience, and let us drift together into the past. In the structured world of feudal Japan, destiny wasn't something you pursued, was predetermined by birth, bloodline, and ancestors who made decisions generations before you drew breath. Your societal position wasn't a suggestion, but an immutable decree. Born to a samurai family, you inherited not only privilege, but the weighty responsibility of mastering weaponry, battle tactics, and the countless intricate protocols of court etiquette. If peasantry was your lot, your future stretched before you as decades of agricultural toil. The notion of social mobility or entrepreneurship was virtually non-existent. Society divided neatly into four main classes: samurai, peasant, artisan, and merchant, with boundaries that were not merely discouraged from crossing, but forcefully protected. In feudal Japan, one didn't climb the social ladder. One bowed reverently before it. Below even these established classes existed the Atetha, untouchables. These individuals performed society's necessary but stigmatized tasks: butchery, execution, leatherworking. Though essential, they lived as social phantoms, visible only when their services were required, otherwise existing in the shadows of acknowledgement. The hierarchy contained further ironies. Merchants, despite their wealth, occupied a low social rung. Why? Their prosperity came from trade rather than production, a path considered morally questionable. Their efficiency at commerce became their social liability. For the peasantry, taxation on rice harvests was so severe that surplus meant survival, while shortfall often meant starvation. Concealing portions of your harvest to feed your family wasn't seen as self-preservation, but as treasonous defiance, punishable by death. Even the privileged samurai lived under constant pressure. One wrong gesture, one misplaced sneeze in the presence of a superior could bring dishonor to themselves and their lineage. And women, regardless of class, a woman's autonomy ended where male authority began. Marriages were arranged, obedience was expected, and access to education such as poetry was considered a fortunate blessing rather than a right. Thus, life in feudal Japan meant accepting your assigned role in a grand social performance, a beautifully choreographed but rigidly constrained existence from which there was seldom escape. And this social framework was firmly in place before your morning meal. One might imagine feudal life as perpetually grimy, yet Japan cultivated cleanliness with religious devotion, a practice that seemed virtuous until experienced during the bitter cold of winter. Your morning ablutions took place not in a comfortable modern bathroom, but at a stone basin filled with water so cold it seemed to bite. No heated towels, no fragrant soaps, just the sharp shock of icy water drawn from well or stream, without compromise or alternative. The sensation was less refreshment and more an ancestral test of fortitude. Soap existed as a luxury, and even then, its composition of ash or rice bran produced fragrances that suggested monastic discipline rather than sensory pleasure. In rural communities, the communal bathhouse served as the center of hygiene practice. These facilities, heated by laboriously gathered firewood, offered warmth but absolutely no privacy. Bathing meant sharing space with everyone from your neighbors to your landlord, all in a state of complete undress, maintaining dignified silence despite the inherent awkwardness. Protocol dictated thorough scrubbing before soaking, as contaminating the communal water was considered a profound social transgression. Without access to bathhouses, cleanliness became a creative endeavor. Teeth were cleaned with salt or whittled twigs. Fingernails were meticulously maintained. Clothing regularly aired. These practices weren't motivated by vanity, but by the deep-seated belief that uncleanliness represented both spiritual and social failing. For samurai, hygienic standards intensified further. Your lord might conduct inspections without warning, examining every aspect of your presentation. Military exercises might leave your land trampled. But complaint was unthinkable. Such dissent could result in punishment ranging from whipping to execution. Village elders earned the dubious honor of providing counsel that was solicited but rarely heeded. Travel beyond village boundaries required official permission, effectively rendering you a prisoner within your agricultural domain. The occasional festival provided brief respite moments of sock-induced merriment and circular dancing before the relentless cycle of planting resumed. Despite being the essential foundation of the economy and the source of samurai sustenance, peasants remained largely invisible in the social consciousness. Rest days were virtually non-existent in a culture that valued relentless labor, generational perseverance, and the cultivation of modest expectations. Hunger was your constant companion after hours of agricultural labor. But meals in feudal Japan weren't occasions for culinary delight, but rather for basic sustenance. For peasants, rice dominated every meal when fortunate enough to keep it, rather than surrendering it as tax. Less fortunate households subsisted on barley masquerading as rice. Vegetables appeared occasionally, perhaps turnips or pickled radishes, when fortune smiled. Meat remained the privilege of nobility, with the exception, perhaps, of that suspicious chicken that vanished under mysterious circumstances. Fish, when available, came preserved through drying and salting until barely recognizable. Miso soup provided warm sustenance, though calling the sparse broth soup might be charitable. Its flavor profile resembled the cinnamonally nourishing but primarily salty. Samurai enjoyed superior provisions, but observed strict hierarchical serving order, eating only after lords and honored guests had satisfied themselves. This meant consuming cold meals while maintaining the appearance of gratitude for the privilege. Seasonal eating wasn't a culinary trend, but a necessity in an era without refrigeration or global supply chains. Winter meant embracing nature's suggestion to practice involuntary fasting. Medical treatment for food-related illness relied heavily on rest and ancestral. Contemplation recovery meant rejoining society. Failure meant joining those ancestors. Food theft carried severe consequences, not mere reprimand, but public punishment designed to discourage similar transgressions. Tea existed, but not as casual refreshment. The tea ceremony represented a complex ritual, emphasizing posture, etiquette, and philosophical humility, rather than thus, meals proceeded with solemnity and respect, though the fare remained simple. Modest in portion, and occasionally containing mysterious textures. Complaints about cuisine were unthinkable unless one desired alternative feeding arrangements through less conventional orifices. After finishing your modest meal of questionable composition, imagine the momentary impulse to correct someone of higher status, perhaps your lord reciting substandard poetry, an elder misquoting wisdom, or a neighbor making dubious agricultural predictions. Resist this impulse. In feudal Japan, expressing personal opinion wasn't merely discouraged, was potentially fatal. The social hierarchy governed verbal expression with absolute authority. Speaking beyond your station marked you as disrespectful. Criticizing superiors demonstrated insolence. Even humor carried risk. A poorly received jest could border on treason. Family interactions followed similar constraints. Sons deferred to fathers, wives to husbands, and everyone maintained cautious silence regarding the daimyo, unless actively seeking a swift introduction to the afterlife. Samurai cultivated emotional restraint, expressing even rage with measured composure and unbridled tongue, being considered more dangerous than an unskilled sword hand. Unrestrained speech wasn't merely inappropriate but potentially lethal, sometimes forcing others into the uncomfortable position of executing you to preserve honor. Let us turn our attention to the intricate art of apology in feudal Japan. Far from the casual sorry of modern times, an apology was a choreographed performance of contrition. One would bow deeply, perhaps even prostrate oneself, and craft poetry that elegantly captured the depth of one's remorse. Gifts might accompany this ritual, perhaps a caged songbird or an exquisitely crafted komal, while harboring the quiet hope that the offended party wouldn't still demand satisfaction through combat. Beware your tone in these moments. A single misplaced inflection could transform your apology into perceived insolence, defiance, or evidence of moral corruption. In this delicate social landscape, silence often proved the wisest counsel. Even humor required careful navigation. Laughing at an inappropriate moment could signal disrespect, while sharing mirth with a superior might suggest an equality that simply didn't exist. Such presumption could lead to sudden reassignment to remote northern outposts. While speech was theoretically permitted, practical wisdom dictated a life of nodding, offering measured smiles, and fervently hoping your genuine opinions remained safely locked behind your teeth. In feudal Japan, careless words didn't merely damage reputations, they could extinguish entire family lines. Attire in feudal Japan wasn't an expression of individuality, but rather a precise visual codification of social hierarchy. Your garments instantly communicated your station to all observers, particularly how far beneath them you ranked, simply by the design of your sleeves. Clothing revealed not personality, but position, purpose, and whether you possessed the legal right to bear arms without samurai intervention. The elite samurai wore layered silk garments, sometimes with armor elements, always projecting dignity. These ensembles carefully communicated status and martial readiness. Their palette deep indigo earth tones and occasional crimson accents conveyed elegance tinged with menace, silently warning, "I have ended lives for lesser offenses than improper dress." The samurais paired swords, the daisho, consisting of katana and wakizashi, were not merely weapons, but mobile insignia of authority. Drawing one in public represented a final recourse. Wearing them incorrectly invited swift and potentially fatal correction. Peasants, by contrast, dressed in cotton and humility. Their wardrobe consisted primarily of brown, gray, and beige knot from aesthetic preference. But because dyed fabrics were prohibitively expensive for those focused on basic survival, their clothing silently acknowledged, "Yes, I labor in soil. No, this wasn't my life's ambition. Indeed, these represent my only footwear." Merchants, despite their wealth, dressed with calculated restraint, their attire finer than peasants, yet deliberately subdued. Though financially prosperous, their social rank remained below both samurai and peasants, requiring visual discretion. Affluent merchant households mastered the art of appearing respectable without attracting unwanted samurai attention. Artisans and craftspeople maintained neat but modest appearance. Their garments prioritized durability, functionality, and critically inconspicuousness. Drawing attention through dress was considered a fundamental character flaw. Women navigated especially complex sartorial expectations, balancing grace and submission while literally wrapped in layers of symbolic fabric. Hairstyles conveyed specific social messages. Kimono patterns reflected seasonal appropriateness, and wearing colors designated for different occasions could bring dishonor upon one's household and initiate community censure. In essence, clothing wasn't merely adornment, but a complex system of rank, signatures, ritual observance, and survival within the constant scrutiny of both divine forces and maternal in-laws. Perhaps you envision romantic trysts beneath moonlit cherry blossoms, with whispered verses exchanged under the glow of paper lanterns, or passionate embraces between noble warriors and forbidden loves. Reality proves considerably less poetic. In feudal Japan, romantic attachment represented a peripheral concern at best, an unlikely achievement in a life governed by practical considerations. Marriage served not emotional fulfillment, but strategic purposes, creating alliances, confirming status, addressing tax obligations, and preserving ancestral honor. For those of peasant status, marriages were arranged by parents and community elders. Romantic compatibility rarely entered discussions. Physical resilience and dental health commanded greater attention. For samurai families, marital stakes rose even higher. Marriages functioned as political instruments. Partners were selected to strengthen clan alliances, secure territorial holdings, or resolve grievances through exchanges of fine garments. The objective wasn't happiness, but stability, preferably one that wouldn't collapse during crucial agricultural seasons. Love letters might occasionally circulate, but only when composed with flawless calligraphy, employing seasonally appropriate metaphors, and delivered with absolute discretion by household staff, who invariably comprehended more than they revealed. Women experienced even greater restrictions. A samurai's daughter might find herself betrothed by age 15, expected to master calligraphy, etiquette, needlework, and the refined ability to conceal disappointment. Her responsibilities included producing male heirs, serving tea with precision, and resolutely avoiding romantic entanglements with music instructors. Genuine romantic love, characterized by longing glances and passionate declarations, remained confined to poetic works, theatrical productions, and tragic spirit tales. To experience romantic love in feudal Japan, one's best opportunity lay in witnessing no dramas depicting doomed lovers transforming into ethereal mist. Those who ventured beyond their prescribed relationship boundaries faced severe consequences. Adultery could result in exile, disgrace, or execution. Such punishment might be administered by one's spouse, lord, or in laws whoever acted most expeditiously, even for samurai, maintaining concubines while common practice merely complicated emotional dynamics. It simply introduced additional individuals before whom one must maintain composed disappointment. Indeed, people did fall in love secretly, painfully, occasionally, with unsuitable partners, and invariably at inopportune moments. In feudal Japan, love wasn't forbidden outright. It simply represented a dangerously inconvenient complication. In feudal Japan, mortality wasn't a distant abstraction, but an ever-present companion, your neighbor, colleague, and constant shadow. One didn't plan for retirement, but rather for one's inevitable departure, as death represented not tragedy, but an anticipated scene in life's predetermined narrative. Consider the samurai, these distinguished warriors who moved through life accompanied by two swords and a predetermined exit strategy. Military defeat, ritual suicide, dishonor, ritual suicide, accidentally spilling sake on a lord's garment, ritual suicide with appropriate musical accompaniment. This wasn't a private matter, but a public ceremony executed with precision comparable to tea rituals, albeit with considerably more bloodshed. Peasants enjoyed no extended life expectancy. Agricultural failures meant starvation. Failure to meet taxation requirements could result in one's head serving as a cautionary display. Drought, disease, bandit, incursions. Select your preferred method of untimely demise, with limited recourse beyond warm beverages and optimistic herbal remedies. Regarding bandits, these were genuine threats, omnipresent and indifferent to your year-long cultivation of radishes. Rural thoroughfares presented such dangers that travel occurred only when absolutely necessary. Expressing intentions to visit distant relatives translated to, "I presently value my continued existence." For women, childbirth represented a precarious gamble. Complications, unfortunate indeed. Midwives provided assistance, but medical interventions largely consisted of intensified prayers and additional sterilized linens. If your husband perished in disgrace, you might be expected to follow not metaphorically, but literally, with blade in hand. Natural forces presented additional hazards: earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, famines. Japan's landscape harbored countless potential catastrophes. Your dwelling might vanish beneath water or earth without warning. With only properly secured roofing and profound spiritual acceptance serving as protection. Perhaps most sobering, maintaining composure throughout these trials was expected. Expressions of terror or resistance to fate demonstrated undignified character. True nobility required greeting death with formal respect, composing final verses, and meeting one's end with the same composure shown during uncomfortable familial gatherings. While feudal Japan offered undeniable beauty, mortality remained an integral design element. Modern perspectives encourage pursuing dreams, embracing authenticity, and living personal truth. In feudal Japan, truth aligned precisely with clan expectations. Individualism represented not virtue, but danger, signal. One existed not as an independent entity pursuing personal destiny, but as a minor branch of an essential family tree, tasked with preventing that tree from igniting through inappropriate behaviors, like expressing independent thoughts or developing affection for merchants' daughters. Your clan encompassed everything: identity, reputation, future prospects flowing through your family name. You existed within a complex network of obligations, honor codes, and expectations so intricate it resembled a metaphysical ledger. Even samurai, despite their proud warrior status, fought not for personal glory, but for their lord, household, ancestors. Their ideal death served not personal honor, but enhanced the reputation of superiors, while dying honorably represented one achievement. Perishing in ways that caused even slight clan embarrassment created multi-generational calamity. In feudal Japan, your identity was inseparably woven into your family tapestry. Your actions cast reflections, not merely on yourself, but rippled through generations, past, present, and future. Your father's reputation colored how others perceived you. Your grandfather's decisions continued to shape your family's standing decades later. Your cousin in a distant province might still bear the weight of an ancestor's misstep. This wasn't mere guilt by association, it was existence defined by association, harboring dreams beyond your predetermined path. Perhaps you yearn to open a noodle shop, having discovered a passion for culinary arts. How quaint! Unfortunately, your ancestral clan has raised horses for generations, so your destiny lies in stable work-brushing hooves until your final breath. Perhaps you've discovered an aptitude for painting. Wonderful. Your artistic expression will be confined to decorating your family's sponsored temple, following centuries-old artistic conventions, working in reverent silence. The specter of scandal loomed perpetually. One ill-considered affair, one evening of excessive sake, one poem deemed too provocative, and the repercussions cascaded throughout your entire family network. Your siblings would face social rejection, your mother would endure public humiliation, and your great-uncle might be compelled to restore family honor through ritual suicide. You existed not as an autonomous individual, but as a living representative of your lineage, strategic piece on the clan's board, a walking liability. Yet perform your prescribed role with precision, bow at appropriate angles. Marry according to family strategy, and perhaps your clan might occasionally speak your name with a whisper of pride. This constituted the pinnacle of personal achievement in feudal Japan. Let us suppose you've navigated the treacherous waters of social hierarchy, survived potential sword duels, mastered the intricate honor system, and somehow managed to pay your rice tax. Congratulations on your remarkable resilience. Now prepare to confront an equally formidable adversary, the natural environment. Feudal Japan presented a landscape of breathtaking aesthetic beauty, majestic, snow-crowned mountains, tranquil forests, ethereal cherry blossoms, alongside an environmental reality that seemed designed for human suffering. The scenery might inspire poetry, but the climate inspired prayers for survival. Consider the typhoons, not gentle storms, but wrathful divine visitations that descended without mercy, unleashing torrential rains and devastating winds that tested the structural integrity of delicate rice paper dwellings. Roofs became airborne, roads disappeared beneath surging waters, and the rice crop you had tenderly cultivated for months floated away like fallen cherry blossoms. Earthquakes struck without warning, violent, sudden, completely unpredictable. No warning systems existed beyond a momentary rumble, a fleeting sensation of disorientation before your carefully arranged household collapsed into disarray. Surviving the Earth's convulsions merely introduced new perils. Fire represented a constant threat in a society constructed primarily of wood, including, metaphorically speaking, your ill-considered life choices. Flooding transformed villages into sodden bowls of mud where crops drowned and livestock wandered away. Yet your landlord's tax demands remained inexorable, now accompanied by interest charges. Drought proved equally merciless, relentless sun, baking the earth until rice fields resembled a Zen garden of cracks and fissures. Religious rituals multiplied, while suspicious glances toward neighbors' wells intensified. Winter arrived not as a picturesque snowscape, but as bone-penetrating cold, inadequate blankets, and fires that surrendered to darkness by midnight. Heating wasn't a technological convenience, but a communal experience in endurance. You warmed your hands over earthenware braziers, while contemplating whether frostbite might become this season's unwelcome fashion. Even volcanic activity occasionally entered this natural symphony of hardship. Japan's position within the Ring of Fira designation, as ominous as it sounds, meant that eruptions could transform entire regions into ashen landscapes, molten destruction, or the disconcerting realization that your shrine had been transmuted into an impromptu rock garden. No emergency management agencies existed, no coordinated disaster relief. When your dwelling collapsed, personal reconstruction became your sole option. When food supplies perished, hunger became your companion. If your lord's estate suffered similar calamity, your tax obligation remained undiminished. Natural disaster constituted no valid excuse for failing obligations. In feudal Japan, nature functioned not as scenic background, but as an omnipresent reminder that even divine forces occasionally experienced profound displeasure. The societal structure of feudal Japan resembled a mountain watershed: power, responsibilities, expectations, and blame, all flowing inexorably downward. Presumptions of personal importance were swiftly dispelled by reality's hierarchy. As a peasant, the village headman governed your existence. He answered to local samurai. They served the regional daimyo. The daimyo pledged fealty to the shogun. The shogun maintained theoretical deference to an emperor who exercised minimal governance while maintaining an ethereal presence in the capital, adorned in ceremonial splendor. Even the samurai, those iconic warriors of legendary prowess, occupied middle positions within this rigid structure. Their existence centered on serving their lord, awaiting commands, occasionally engaging in conflicts they neither initiated nor understood, fighting for territorial claims they would never possess, seeking glory that would ultimately enhance their master's reputation rather than their own. Their theoretical honor rarely translated into practical autonomy. They represented, in essence, exceptionally well-dressed middle management armed with deadly blades. The daimyo, regional lords commanding provinces and armies, projected an aura of untouchable authority until the shogun perceived threats in their rising influence. Then suddenly their fortified castles faced inspection. Their correspondence required scrutiny, and their political aspirations met abrupt termination alongside their physical existence. Even the shogun, military dictator and supreme commander, navigated constant vigilance, monitoring court intrigues, clan rivalries, economic fluctuations, and perpetual threats from ambitious relatives seeking to enhance their position through his removal. His rule proved absolute, yet his repose remained elusive. The emperor, while theoretically sovereign, above all, wielded minimal practical authority. His position resembled a sacred artifact, untouchable, yet impossible to disregard. His functions included blessing ceremonies, designating historical eras, occasional poetic composition, and frequently financial insolvency. This hierarchical structure permitted no mobility. One occupied an assigned position with the immovable permanence of a perfectly pruned bonsai. Ambition invited not admiration, but apprehension. Elevation within the hierarchy merely positioned one closer to potential elimination. Respect flowed upward by compulsion, while authority descended without restraint. Commands required obedience rather than discussion. Disagreement introduced peril, and any suggestion of exceeding one's designated station represented not ambition but suicidal inclination, elegantly attired. Regardless of position, peasant, merchant, samurai, or lord, someone above controlled your destiny, while someone below anticipated your misstep. Educational opportunities in feudal Japan directly correlated with social position. For those occupying society's lower strata, knowledge remained largely inaccessible, occasionally hazardous. Beginning at the social apex, samurai children enjoyed remarkable privilege. From earliest years, they received training in literacy, martial arts, formal etiquette, poetic composition, archery, horsemanship, and the subtle art of maintaining perpetual composure. A typical samurai youth mastered death poetry composition by 14 age, when modern adolescents struggle with basic handwriting. Their education followed rigorous protocols with defined purpose, service, protection, and preservation of clan dignity. Curriculum included Chinese classical literature, Bushido ethical principles, and ceremonial movements executed with such precision that spiritual forces took notice. Merchant and artisan families received more limited education, mathematics, record-keeping, perhaps rudimentary literacy, but exclusively knowledge serving commercial functions. Classical philosophical texts remained beyond reach. Practical calculations concerning pickled vegetable pricing represented educational pinnacles, pragmatic, certainly, transcendent, hardly. For peasant children, education assumed stark simplicity. This implement cultivates soil. This plant provides sustenance. Begin labor before solar position disadvantages productivity. Parental instruction focused on agricultural techniques, survival strategies, and maintaining appropriate deference before tax collectors. Literacy remained exceptional. Formal education represented unattainable luxury. The only written materials most would encounter were official proclamations announcing tax increases nailed to village trees. For young women in feudal Japan, education was strictly defined by social class. Unless born into nobility, formal learning remained out of reach. Instead, a girl's education centered on domestic artistry, sewing delicate stitches, mastering intricate etiquette, performing tea ceremonies with precision, and cultivating the art of eloquent silence while managing household affairs. The truly fortunate might receive instruction in calligraphy or poetry, but only if these refined pursuits complemented, never interfered with her primary duties of folding kimono with spiritual mindfulness. This education system wasn't designed for self-discovery or intellectual curiosity. It existed solely to prepare each person for their predetermined societal role. The mere concept of learning for personal enjoyment would have scandalized elders into spilling their carefully measured sake. Knowledge represented power, precisely why it remained so. Meticulously controlled and distributed according to one's station, feudal Japan cultivated aesthetic perfection that simultaneously soothed the soul and honored ancestors. Yet beneath this visual harmony lurked constant judgment. Every cultural practice carried consequences for missteps. The arrangement of flowers, pouring of tea, or folding of garments followed rigid protocols established centuries before your ancestors were born. One improperly placed chrysanthemum could transform you into village gossip, with implications far more serious than mere embarrassment. Consider the deceptively serene tea ceremony. What appeared as tranquil ritual was, in reality, a choreographed social examination. Each movement, how one sat, rotated the cup precisely twice, expressed gratitude with appropriate humility, and sipped in contemplative silence required constant mental calculation. Had you bowed too deeply, not deeply enough, with excessive enthusiasm, a minor error might merely create awkwardness. A significant breach could reveal a fundamental character defect, possibly inherited from some disreputable ancestor. Calligraphy, too, transcended mere artistic expression. Each brushstroke revealed your inner discipline, personality, and spiritual alignment. Imprecise handwriting didn't simply indicate carelessness, it exposed emotional instability and improper reverence. Your characters on paper betrayed your character within. Even poetry carried hidden dangers. Composing haiku demanded seasonal awareness, appropriate paper selection, and metaphorical skill balancing nature and emotion without excessive personal revelation. Verses too passionate suggested refinement lacking. To restrained indicated spiritual coldness. To clever betrayed inappropriate pride. Suddenly, your invitation to seasonal moon viewing ceremonies mysteriously vanished. Culture in feudal Japan functioned as an elegant competition. Participation demonstrated not enjoyment but proof of composure, refinement, and profound fear of appearing unpolished. Beauty wasn't effortless inspiration, but rather a silk-draped battlefield. Should your flower arrangement violate established principles, may the ancestral spirits have mercy on your meticulously pruned bonsai. After witnessing the rigid hierarchy, primitive hygiene, unyielding honor codes, and endless rice consumption, we must acknowledge a harsh truth. You wouldn't survive a single day in feudal Japan. Not from weakness or sensitivity, but because this society wasn't designed for individual survival. It existed for submission, precision, and unflinching obedience. Every moment presented tests of posture, loyalty, and whether you bowed at precisely the correct angle while offering seasonally appropriate greetings with properly modulated emotions. Failure brought consequences ranging from public humiliation to ritual suicide. No personal days existed, no authentic self-expression. Birth assigned your role, society handed you life's script, and you performed it with lethal elegance until death. Deviation wasn't courageous, threatened social stability. Individual desires meant nothing compared to clan honor, lord's commands, and ancestral land. As samurai, you carried centuries of honor weight and the very real expectation of composing death poetry before disemboweling yourself when necessary. As peasant, you labored from dawn until your spine permanently curved, praying neither weather nor lord's whims destroyed you. As woman, your existence became a carefully managed performance of grace, silence, and sacrifice. For everyone else, the system ensured you remained exactly where fate placed you. Feudal Japan achieved breathtaking beauty. Architecture, ceremonies, poetry are tall, meticulously crafted. Yet this beauty concealed razor edges. It demanded discipline that could shatter bones and respect so absolute it consumed individuality entirely. You would inevitably fail, perhaps speaking out of turn, laughing too loudly, or stepping across a threshold with improper foot placement, maybe forgetting to bow, asking uncomfortable questions, or suggesting even minor changes. Any such transgressions immediately marked you as threatening social harmony. The tragic brilliance of feudal Japan. It wasn't designed for comfort, but for endurance. In an era when women rarely spoke publicly, much less commanded armies, Artemisia of Caria emerged as historical anomalous, someone who by every societal rule should have been impossible. Yet there she sat upon her throne, bearing dual burdens as queen and naval commander, strategizing warfare alongside the ancient world's most formidable men. Artemisia governed Halicarnassus, a coastal city in southwestern Asia Minor, modern Turkey. Though technically a Persian Empire vassal, Halicarnassus existed within a complex patchwork of territories caught between competing regional powers. Artemisia didn't merely inherit leadership, she transformed it into something dangerous. Greek by blood, Persian by allegiance, and female by birth, each identity carried tremendous significance in an age dominated by warriors and masculinity. With Carian paternal lineage and Cretan maternal heritage, Artemisia defied convention after her husband's death. Rather than yielding to male succession, she seized power directly. This quiet rebellion marked only her beginning. Beyond mere rulership, she sought conquest. When Xerxes the Great launched his legendary Greek invasion around 480 BCE, Artemisia did the unthinkable for a woman of her era. She volunteered for combat, not as healer or distant prayer giver, but as fleet commander, risking death alongside men. She contributed 5 vessels, swift, lethal warships, personally leading them into battles, chaos, and Xerxes, emperor of lands stretching from India to Egypt, didn't merely tolerate her presence. He valued her counsel above many men's. Her decision bordered on madness. 2 contemporaries, a Greek fighting for Persia, inconceivable. Yet Artemisia calculated precisely. Her motivation transcended loyalty to bloodlines or empires. She played power's dangerous game with greater skill than most men surrounding her. In a world carved by masculine ambition, Artemisia never requested permission. She built her fleet, sailed directly into history's narrative, and challenged anyone to stop her advance. By aligning with Xerxes, Artemisia effectively declared war against her Greek kinsmen. This decision raised suspicions before a single ship launched. Beyond standard accusations of treachery, her choice became deeply personal. To Greeks, she embodied betrayal in royal garments, a queen-turned-mercenary who exchanged cultural heritage for a foreign king's favor. Artemisia appeared utterly unconcerned by such judgments. Instead, she fully embraced her position within Persian power structures, where she rightfully belonged. Xerxes, notorious for surrounding himself with brutal warriors and sycophants, discovered in Artemisia something rare: unfiltered, penetrating honesty. She delivered necessary truths rather than flattering falsehoods. During war, councils filled with decorated generals and blood-soaked officials, Artemisia spoke with strategic clarity, rarely mistaken in assessment. Her advice combined tactical brilliance with warnings others lacked courage to voice. Before the pivotal Battle of Salamis, she urged Xerxes against direct naval confrontation with Greeks, warning that narrow straits would neutralize Persian numerical advantages. Xerxes, swayed by overconfidence and flattery, ignored her counsel, a decision with disastrous consequences. Even among Persian allies, Artemisia's authority created complications. Many commanders resented her position. Beyond her gender, she was ethnically Greek, yet spoke truth to power, while commanding her vessels with unsettling effectiveness. She wasn't decorative symbolism. She came to achieve victory. This reality disturbed numerous battle-hardened warlords who dedicated lifetimes to conquest. Meanwhile, across the Aegean, Her reputation spread ominously throughout Greece. Herodotus himself, a native of Halicarnassus, documented her with fascinating ambivalence combining awe and suspicion, typically reserved for mythological beings. To some, she represented Medusa wearing armor. To others, a misunderstood genius who dared think with masculine strategic clarity while outperforming most men. Artemisia embodied multiple identities: loyal subject, brilliant strategist, cultural traitor, and visionary leader. Above all, she operated as political pragmatist who recognized warfare's fundamental truth: identity becomes flexible, only power endures. The Battle of Salamis ultimately tested Artemisia's strategic brilliance and extraordinary courage. Following defeat, the Persian king acted decisively and escaped unharmed. Xerxes observed her exceptional performance. Now retreating on land, absorbing devastating losses, the Persian military required immediate strategic recalibration. In a remarkable moment of vulnerable trust, Xerxes turned again to Artemisian not as curiosity, but as his most reliable advisor. He posed a deeply personal question: what course should he now take? Artemisia, characteristically direct, delivered precisely what no proud emperor wished to hear: retreat immediately. She advised him to return to Persia, leaving his trusted general Mardonius responsible for remaining Greek operations. You've accomplished your primary objective. Athens lies in ashes. Don't sacrifice everything through overreach. This summarized her counsel. Remarkably, Xerxes followed her advice. The emperor, who had dismissed most war council recommendations, heeded this woman's strategic assessment. This moment confirmed what others merely suspected. Artemisia wasn't simply courageous, she possessed political lethality. She recognized when to attack, when to deceive, and critically, when to withdraw. Her power derived not from brute force, but from clarity, a quality perpetually scarce among kings and conquerors. In the aftermath of battle, Artemisia received perhaps the ultimate validation of her wisdom and worth. Xerxes entrusted her with his son's guardianship. In the ancient world, where bloodlines determined empires' fates, this was no mere courtesy, but profound trust. You didn't place your heirs, your dynasty's future, in hands that might tremble or betray. You chose unwavering loyalty and impeccable judgment. Artemisia, once merely a ruler from empire's edge, had maneuvered herself to its very core. When she returned to Halicarnassus, she arrived transformed. Gone was the queen whose authority might be questioned. In her place stood a figure of undeniable gravitas. Her legend crystallized, not in marble, but in whispers that spread through royal corridors. She had faced the might of empires, stood unflinching before their power, and emerged not just unscathed, but elevated, while others would have retreated into diplomatic shadows, seeking mere survival. Artemisia had sailed directly into war's heart, and returned carrying greater influence than when she departed. Artemisia's reputation flourished, not only through her naval prowess, but in the minds of those who chronicled her exploits, particularly Herodotus, history's acknowledged father. This wasn't mere coincidence, but geographical intimacy. Herodotus hailed from Halicarnassus, the very city Artemisia governed. He wasn't documenting some distant figure shrouded in myth. He was recording his own queen's legacy. Yet remarkably, Herodotus avoided the common pitfalls of portraying women in power. He crafted neither virtuous maiden nor scheming villain, but something historical accounts rarely preserved: a leader of formidable competence, calculation, and charisma. His account of Salamis reveals not just her courage, but her tactical brilliance, the calculated sacrifice of an allied vessel. Her escape amidst Greek confusion, the cold pragmatism that defined her command. In Herodotus' narrative, Artemisia transcends simple categorization as military commander. She emerges as paradox, embodied, simultaneously admired, yet feared, respected, yet regarded with suspicion. This respect wasn't granted freely, but earned through undeniable merit. Though surrounded by powerful men like Xerxes and Mardonius, she somehow eclipsed them all. Where they succumbed to ambition's undertow, she navigated with prescient clarity. She recognized precisely when to advance and when to disappear, wisdom rare in any era, but particularly extraordinary in a woman from a world that conflated femininity with weakness. Perhaps this contradiction captivated Herodotus most profoundly. Artemisia defied categorization, refusing to fit neatly within her era's cultural boundaries or historians' comfortable classifications. She wasn't revolutionary in intent, yet her actions subverted expectations. She wasn't fighting for women's equality, a concept centuries from articulation, yet she undermined patriarchal structures through sheer competence. Her influence spread not through grand monuments or golden tributes, but through stories that passed between men forced to acknowledge her superiority. In war councils, she out-strategized them. In naval confrontations, she outmaneuvered them. In political maneuvering, she outlasted them. For all their martial glory, these men required scribes to preserve their memory. Artemisia possessed something far more enduring. As Herodotus set aside his scroll to dip his pen anew, he wasn't merely recording events, but preserving an enigma shaped like a queen. Curiously, the name Artemisia didn't fade after her death. A century later, it resurfaced with Artemisia II of Caria, namesake and probable descendant, who likewise ruled Halicarnassus. Later accounts claimed she threw herself from a cliff in disbar behavior, utterly inconsistent with a battle-hardened naval commander, yet perfectly aligned with narratives that transform female strength into tragedy. Alternative versions painted her as poisonous schemer, more sorceress than sovereign. This pattern repeats throughout history. When women claim power through intellect or audacity, subsequent generations either diminish them to damsels or darken them to villains. Artemisia endured both distortions, neither honoring historical truth. The authentic Artemisia governed not through seduction or sorcery, but through vision, reason, and calculated strategic brilliance. She mastered a masculine domain by her own rules and triumphed. This, above all, terrified her successors, for if one woman accomplished this, what prevented others? Even today, adaptations continue, distorting her essence. Hollywood reimagined her as vengeance-driven femme fatale in 300 Rise of an Empire. Entertaining perhaps, but historically indefensible. Yet her continued reinvention proves her legacy's enduring potency. The woman who inspired such fear didn't perish. She metamorphosed into legend, memory, and history's persistent, uncomfortable question. What if more women had emulated Artemisia? When she vanished from historical records, she didn't disappear from history itself. She simply transformed, like ripples spreading from a warship's wake. Her influence continued long after her final voyage. No magnificent tomb marks her resting place. No sculptures preserve her countenance, yet her presence persists embedded in Halicarnassus' foundations. Whispered through ancient chronicles, debated by historians, striving to comprehend how she achieved the seemingly impossible, because Artemisia's existence defied possibility. She ruled when female governance was forbidden, fought in conflicts where women were excluded, offered counsel where female voices were silenced, somehow commanded attention. She wasn't merely tolerated, but respected, perhaps her most remarkable achievement, not simply surviving antiquity as a woman wielding power, but earning reluctant admiration that gave even enemies pause. Centuries later, her name remains paradoxical, simultaneously revered, yet obscured. Unlike Cleopatra or Joan of Arc, she never achieved household recognition, but perhaps that's appropriate. Artemisia never pursued legendary status. She pursued results. She wasn't celebrated for mythic beauty or tragic romance. She was a leader, pragmatist, strategist. Her drama unfolded not in poetry, but in war rooms, tense silence, aboard ships' confined quarters, and in the steady gaze of a king who chose to listen. Today, her narrative invites fresh examination, not merely as a woman navigating a man's domain, but as testament that courage manifests in various forms. Sometimes it doesn't wear crowns or brandish weapons. Sometimes it sits at power's periphery, speaks uncomfortable truths, and sails directly into chaos. Artemisia never needed rescue or reimagining. What she deserves is remembrance as she truly was, incisive, formidable, brilliant. Within an empire constructed by men, she charted her own course through hostile waters, against cultural currents, through wars, obscuring fog. And as long as vessels sail and history honors those who speak when silence offers safety, Artemisia of Caria will never truly vanish. In the twilight of human history, before glass bent light to our will, before Copernicus dared whisper that we were not the center of everything, our ancestors possessed just two humble tools to decode the heavens: watchful eyes and patient stone. Yet, somehow, these simple means were enough to unlock the universe's secrets. Across the ancient world, civilizations gazed upward, not merely in awe, but with purpose. The celestial tapestry wasn't decorative, it was humanity's first calendar, compass, deity, and prophecy woven into one. Thus was born astronomy, mankind's oldest science. Before it even had a name, it was necessity incarnate. Farmers relied on it to know when seeds should meet soil. Sailors used it to navigate vast waters. Priests needed it to time sacred rituals. And the astronomers, those curious souls, often indistinguishable from priests, rulers, or mathematicians, became the keepers of cosmic knowledge, upon which entire societies depended. But how did they accomplish this without telescopes? They transformed temples into cosmic instruments, not just places of worship, but celestial observatories. Massive structures like Stonehenge in England, Nabta Playa in Egypt, and the great stepped pyramids of Mesoamerica were cosmic calendars rendered in stone, meticulously aligned with the ballet of sun, moon, and stars. These structures captured specific light patterns during solstices and equinoxes, sacred architecture that doubled as astronomical technology. The great temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak stands as testament to this ingenuity. Oriented so precisely that the summer solstice sun would rise exactly between its massive pylons, bathing the inner sanctuary in golden light. At Chichen Itza, Mayan architects created El Castillo, where, twice yearly, the equinox sun casts triangular shadows that create the illusion of a serpent descending the pyramid's northern staircase, a spectacle of light and shadow, still drawing gasps from modern visitors. In India, the colossal stone instruments of Jantar Mantar allowed astronomers to track celestial bodies with precision that rivals modern equipment. These achievements weren't lucky accidents or primitive approximations. They were deliberate, data-driven feats of cosmic engineering spanning continents and millennia. From Andean mountaintops to Nile Valley temples, from Babylonian ziggurats to Chinese observatories, humanity was building with the stars in mind-wetting stone to starlight through mathematical precision. Ancient astronomers charted planetary motions, predicted eclipses, and even tracked retrograde movement using nothing but patience, observation, and an intuitive sense of cosmic order. The heavens weren't simply observed, they were measured, mapped, and architecturally encoded into civilization itself. Long before glass could magnify distant worlds, our ancestors were recording celestial rhythms in stone, in silence, with breathtaking accuracy. In the sun-scorched plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the Sumerians gazed skyward and recognized not chaos, but cosmic clockwork. Around 3000 BCE, these early astronomers weren't merely weaving myths about the heavens. They were structuring their entire existence around celestial patterns. To Sumerian eyes, the sky wasn't random splendor, but a divine timetable, and their sacred duty was to decipher it. These patient observers laid the foundation for what we now call celestial mechanics, recognizing that the wandering motions of sun, moon, and planets weren't arbitrary, but predictable heavenly timepieces marking the passage of days and seasons. This revelation led them to develop one of humanity's earliest calendars, dividing the year according to lunar cycles. Though imperfect by modern standards, it proved remarkably effective for tracking agricultural seasons and ritual obligations. Perhaps their most enduring legacy is the sexagesimal system, the basic STE, mathematics still embedded in how we measure time and angles today. When you glance at your watch with its 60 minutes, or measure a circle's 360 degrees, you're channeling Sumerian innovation across 5 millennia. Without telescopes, they built ziggurats, massive stepped towers, reaching toward the heavens. From these elevated platforms, priest astronomers maintained meticulous records on clay tablets, documenting when Venus appeared at dusk, when the moon turned blood red during eclipses, or when familiar star clusters returned after months hidden below the horizon. Their term for these celestial observers, Amanu, carried dual meaning. They were both scientists and spiritual guides, bridging the material and divine realms. Over generations, Sumerian stargazing evolved into increasingly sophisticated systems. Their cultural heirs, the Babylonians, compiled vast star catalogs, predicted eclipses with uncanny precision, and named constellations we still recognize today. But everything began with those first Sumerian scribes pressing cuneiform into wet clay, recording heaven's movements and establishing humanity's earliest astronomical archive. Perhaps most fascinating is how this proto-science blended seamlessly with spiritual understanding. To these ancient observers, the sky was simultaneously divine and mathematically predictable. Their gods moved in patterns, and by understanding these celestial rhythms, humans could align everything from crop planting to royal coronations with cosmic harmony. The Sumerians didn't merely gaze upward in wonder. They looked up and began to measure. And with that simple act, they initiated humanity's enduring relationship with the Straza, partnership of observation and calculation that continues to this day. If the Sumerians kindled astronomy's first flames, the Babylonians transformed it into a blazing beacon of mathematical precision. By 1800 BCE, their empire's astronomers weren't merely watching the skies, they were predicting them with astonishing accuracy. Eclipses, planetary alignments, retrograde motions, all were meticulously charted, recorded, and projected forward in time with remarkable reliability. These weren't mystic prophecies, but calculated forecasts based on generations of systematic observation. The Babylonians elevated Sumerian observational techniques by infusing them with mathematical rigor. They documented celestial positions on clay tablets, known today as the Enuma Anu Enlil, and the Mulapi, some of the oldest astronomical texts ever discovered. These weren't poetic descriptions, but precise data sets, line after line, recording when Venus would appear on the horizon, how long it would remain visible when a solar eclipse might darken the land. These tablets essentially constituted the world's first scientific almanacs, astronomical record-keeping on an unprecedented scale. Their most remarkable achievement, the ability to predict lunar eclipses using the Saros-Cycla complex pattern, spanning approximately 18 years, after which eclipse sequences repeat themselves. Though they couldn't explain the underlying mechanics, they recognized the pattern's predictive power. And for a civilization that merged astronomy with divination, the ability to foresee celestial events conferred immense authority, both religious and political. While Greek astronomers often receive credit for developing the zodiac, Babylonian stargazers pioneered this cosmic mapping system centuries earlier. They divided the celestial sphere into 12 equal segments, each anchored to a prominent constellation, establishing the foundation for the zodiac signs still referenced today. Yes, when someone asks your astrological sign, you're participating in a cultural tradition with Babylonian origins. What truly distinguished Babylonian astronomy was its mathematical sophistication. They tracked complex planetary motions, including the puzzling retrograde path, using arithmetic methods to approximate celestial cycles with remarkable precision. Unlike the geometric models later developed by Greeks, Babylonian astronomers relied on purely arithmetic calculations, and, for practical purposes, their system worked brilliantly. They conceptualized the universe as a vast ledger of repeating patterns, a celestial machine of predictable cycles. Their astronomers weren't merely mystics or priests, but early scientists in the truest sense, hunched over clay tablets by lamplight, decoding cosmic rhythms through numbers and notations, writing the language of the sky in cuneiform symbols. While Babylonians were busy predicting eclipses with mathematical precision, the ancient Egyptians were synchronizing their entire civilization to the stars with elegant pragmatism. Along the Nile Valley, astronomy wasn't an intellectual curiosity, was the key to survival itself. At the heart of this cosmic timekeeping stood a single brilliant star, Sirius, the brightest jewel in the night sky. Egyptian astronomers noticed a remarkable correlation. Each year, just before the life-giving Nile began its annual flood, Sirius would reappear at dawn after a period of invisibility event known as its heliacal rising. This celestial marker became the cornerstone of their calendar system. This wasn't mere astronomical poetry. It was vital information. The Nile's flood determined agricultural cycles, and missing that crucial planting window could spell catastrophe for an entire kingdom. This observation led the Egyptians to create a sophisticated 365-day solar calendar divided into 12 30-day months, with 5 additional festival days added at year's end. This system approximated the solar year with remarkable accuracy centuries before Julius Caesar's calendar reforms. Yet Egyptian astronomical prowess extended beyond Sirius. They tracked celestial bodies from temples aligned with breathtaking precision to stellar events. The massive temple of Karnak was oriented so the summer solstice sun would shine directly through its central axis, illuminating the sacred inner sanctuary. Other temples aligned perfectly with the rising or setting of stars deemed sacred in Egyptian cosmology. Perhaps most iconic are the pyramids themselves. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed around 2560 BCE, aligns almost perfectly with the cardinal directions of feet, requiring sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Its internal shafts appear targeted toward specific stars, particularly in the Orion constellation and toward Sirius, suggesting a celestial connection between the heavens and the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. This wasn't merely funerary architecture, but cosmic engineering on a monumental scale. Egyptian priests often served dual roles as astronomers, observing the night sky not only to time religious ceremonies, but to interpret divine will through celestial omens. Astronomy, theology, and governance formed an inseparable trinity. To rule Egypt effectively meant understanding the language of the stars. What remains most impressive is that, without telescopes, without even simple lenses, they developed comprehensive systems for tracking time, orienting massive structures, and predicting natural phenomena through patient observation and meticulous record-keeping across generations. The ancient Egyptians didn't view the sky as entertainment. They saw a divine timepiece ticking with purpose, echoing eternity's rhythm in the stars' nightly dance. Hidden within the lush jungles of Mesoamerica, long before European caravels appeared on the horizon, Maya civilization was cultivating one of history's most sophisticated astronomical traditions. Without metal tools, without wheels, without any optical instruments, they mapped celestial movements with a precision that continues to astonish modern astronomers. For the Maya, astronomy wasn't an abstract pursuit for scholarly elites. It formed the very foundation of society. Their rulers were viewed as cosmic intermediaries between earthly and celestial realms, with every significant political or religious event carefully timed to correspond with meaningful astronomical alignments. Eclipses, solstices, equinoxes, and Venus cycles weren't merely observed phenomena, they were powerful symbols used to legitimize royal authority and divine mandate. Imagine standing beneath a Mayan sky, where priests tracked Venus with such precision they could predict its dance among the stars to within a single day over centuries. The Maya didn't merely observe this brilliant planetary jewel, they wove its 584-day disappearance and reappearance cycle into the very fabric of their civilization, timing warfare and religious ceremonies to Venus's celestial rhythm. Their astronomical masterpiece, the Dresden Codex, survives as testament to this obsession. Of Venus table, so accurate it would make modern astronomers pause in admiration. But the Maya weren't content with tracking a single celestial body. They created the monumental long count calendar, capable of spanning vast temporal distances, thousands of years, with mathematical elegance. Their understanding of the solar year, 365.20 days, rivaled modern calculations. Like cosmic accountants, they maintained multiple calendrical systems simultaneously. The sacred 260-day Zocan, the solar 365-day Hab, and the historically profound long countall, ticking in perfect synchronicity. Their observatories weren't glass-domed modern structures, but architectural marvels of stone. El Caracol at Chichen Itza stands as a limestone testament to their genius. Its windows and doorways precisely aligned to capture specific astronomical events. Temple staircases became cosmic theaters where shadow and light performed seasonal dramas. Most famously, the equinox serpent of light that appears to slither down El Castillo's northern staircase, a moment when architecture, astronomy, and religious symbolism merged into spectacular theater. For the Maya, the cosmos wasn't something distant to be observed. It was the beating heart of their civilization. Their kings derived authority from celestial alignments. Their monuments rose in harmony with solstices, and their military campaigns marched to Venus's rhythms. They didn't merely read the stars, they wove celestial patterns into their cultural tapestry. Half a world away, ancient China approached the heavens with equal reverence but different purpose. Here, astronomy transcended science to become statecraft. The emperor revered as the son of heaven, governed through the mandate of heaven, a cosmic endorsement that celestial irregularities could revoke. When stars behaved unexpectedly, dynasties trembled. By 2000 BCE, Chinese astronomers were already keeping meticulous records of celestial phenomena with bureaucratic precision. They documented comets streaking across night skies, stars exploding into novae, eclipses darkening daylight, sunspots marring the solar surface, and planets wandering through constellations. Many of these ancient observations, preserved in texts like the Shiji and the Book of Han, still serve modern astronomers as historical verification for cosmic events. Perhaps their most remarkable achievement was documenting the supernova of 1054 CIA stellar explosion, so brilliant it remained visible in daylight for 23 days. Chinese astronomers recorded its position with such exactitude that modern scientists could identify its remnants as what we now call the Crab Nebula, a cosmic ghost still expanding through space nearly a millennium later. Chinese astronomical innovation extended beyond observation to invention. They crafted sophisticated instruments like armillary spheres that modeled celestial movements and gnomons that measured solar altitude through shadow casting. Their mechanical ingenuity produced water-powered celestial globes and astronomical clocks centuries before similar devices appeared in Europe. Their organizational system divided the heavens into 28 lunar mansions stellar, groupings that served as celestial signposts for navigation and timekeeping. The Chinese lunar solar calendar they developed, harmonizing lunar months with the solar year, continues to determine traditional festivals like Lunar New Year, a living legacy of ancient astronomy that billions still follow today. Among their most consequential practices was the scrupulous recording of eclipses, both as astronomical phenomena and political omens. An unexpected eclipse could spell disaster for court astronomers and emperor alike, the former risking execution for negligence, the latter potentially losing heaven's mandate to rule. In imperial China, astronomy wasn't an academic pursuit, but the cosmic foundation of political legitimacy. The stars didn't merely mark time, they authenticated truth, and the fate of dynasties hung on their interpretation. Across the Himalayas in ancient India, astronomy blossomed as Jyotisha, the science of light, where cosmic observation merged seamlessly with philosophy, mathematics, ritual, and metaphysics. Beginning as a practical tool for determining auspicious moments for Vedic ceremonies, Indian astronomy evolved into one of antiquity's most mathematically sophisticated celestial sciences. The earliest astronomical references appear in the Vedas, circa 1500 BCE, where sacred texts describe solar and lunar movements and divide the sky into 27 nakshatras lunar mansions that became the foundation of Indian celestial cartography. These star-mapped pathways connected mythology with mathematical precision, creating astrological systems and calendars that continue to guide millions in India today. The mathematical precision of Indian astronomy is astonishing. Ancient scholars calculated solar year lengths with greater accuracy than the Julian calendar that would come centuries later from Rome. The Surya Siddhanta, a foundational text compiled around 500 CE from earlier knowledge, describes Earth's axial tilt, planetary elliptical orbits, and even gravitational concepts centuries before Newton formalized these ideas in Western science. Among India's astronomical luminaries, Aryabhata stands supreme. In 499 CE, he proposed that Earth rotates daily on its axis, a revolutionary concept rarely considered elsewhere at that time. His calculation of the solar year at 365.358 days came remarkably close to modern measurements. His mathematical contributions extended to advanced trigonometry functions, specifically developed for astronomical calculations. Indian astronomers also pioneered practical instruments, elaborate sundials, decimal notation, shadow instruments, and astronomical spheres for measuring celestial angles and positions. Their observatories aligned perfectly with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary conjunctions. Yet, beyond technical brilliance, Indian astronomy embodied philosophical elegance. The universe wasn't viewed as mere clockwork, but as an eternal Sakola cosmic dance of time and space unfolding without end. Astronomy wasn't pursued to dominate nature, but to harmonize with it. In the Indian cosmic vision, understanding celestial mechanics was ultimately about understanding oneself, a sacred geometry where planets moved not just through space, but through the soul's own journey. While other civilizations looked skyward for guidance, ritual timing, or survival knowledge, the ancient Greeks gazed upward and asked fundamental questions. Why do stars move? Why do planets wander? And most profoundly, can cosmic patterns be explained through reason alone? Greek astronomy marked humanity's pivotal relationship shift with the heavens. Where others perceived divine patterns and omens, Greeks sought natural laws. They weren't content with observation. They became theorists, determined to decode celestial mechanics through mathematics, geometry, and philosophical inquiry. The journey began with Thales of Miletus, among the first to suggest that celestial phenomena had natural rather than supernatural causes. Anaximander followed, daringly imagining Earth floating unsupported in space, while proposing that heavens formed a complete sphere. Though these early concepts seem elementary today, they represented radical departures from mythological explanations. The true conceptual revolution came through Pythagoras, who envisioned the cosmos as perfect harmonia music of the spheres governed by mathematical ratios. His followers believed the universe operated according to numerical principles, establishing foundations for theoretical astronomy that transcended mere observation. Yet it was Aristarchus of Samos who came closest to astronomical truth. In the 3rd century BCE, he proposed a heliocentric model, placing the sun, not Earth, at the universe's center. though his revolutionary idea would be ignored for nearly 2 millennia. He planted an intellectual seed that would eventually flower with Copernicus. Hipparchus later emerged as observational astronomy's founding father. He created the first comprehensive star catalog, classified stars by brightness magnitude, discovered the precession of equinoxes, and developed trigonometric tools for calculating celestial positions with remarkable accuracy, all without telescopic assistance. Finally came Claudius Ptolemy, whose Almagest became astronomy's definitive text for over 1,000 years. He synthesized Greek, Babylonian, and Egyptian knowledge into a geocentric model explaining planetary motion through epicycles and differenza, complex yet elegant system that predicted celestial positions with sufficient accuracy to endure until the scientific revolution. While many Greek astronomical theories proved incorrect, their commitment to rational explanation and systematic modeling transformed humanity's cosmic understanding. They taught that celestial movements weren't arbitrary, but followed comprehensible patterns accessible to human reason. With the Greeks, astronomy transcended observation to become intellectual dialogue between earth and sky, between logical deduction and empirical evidence, between what our eyes perceive and what our minds can comprehend. Long before Galileo first pointed a telescope skyward in the early 17th century, humanity had spent millennia studying the heavens with nothing more sophisticated than naked eyes, shadow measurements, and stone markers. Yet the achievements of these ancient stargazers remain nothing short of extraordinary. They mapped constellations, tracked planetary movements, predicted eclipses with remarkable accuracy, and constructed monuments perfectly aligned with solstices and equinoxes, all without lenses, computers, or modern instrumentation. What makes these accomplishments truly remarkable is their independent development. The Sumerians of Mesopotamia, Maya of Mesoamerica, Chinese and Indians of Asia, Greeks and Egyptians around the Mediterranean, each civilization developed astronomical traditions rooted in their unique cultural perspectives. Yet, despite geographical isolation and vast cultural differences, they reached strikingly similar conclusions. The heavens move with predictable order, and that order holds profound significance for human existence. Ancient astronomy transcended mere academic study. It permeated every aspect of daily life, dictating agricultural cycles, religious ceremonies, architectural designs, political decisions, and philosophical understanding. Through celestial observations, ancient peoples determined optimal planting seasons, scheduled sacred rituals, oriented monumental structures, and legitimized ruling powers. Across civilizations, the heavens served as both cosmic clock and spiritual compass, offering humans a way to locate themselves within the grand machinery of existence. Despite their vastly different cosmological models, whether Earth-centered, myth-tempered, or cyclical in nature, all ancient astronomical traditions shared a profound reverence for the cosmos. The night sky wasn't merely a distant canvas of stars. It pulsed with intention, consciousness, and sacred significance. To these early skygazers, celestial bodies weren't just objects, but entities with purpose and meaning. The invention of the telescope in the early 17th century revolutionized our relationship with the heavens. Suddenly, Jupiter's moons came into view. Venus displayed phases like our moon. The sun revealed its blemishes, and countless galaxies emerged from the darkness. Yet these revolutionary discoveries, built upon millennia of patient groundwork, meticulous star mapping, systematic record-keeping, and relentless curiosity laid by generations of ancient astronomers, armed with nothing but their naked eyes and ingenious measuring tools. Their legacy lives on in our daily lives each time we consult a calendar, track celestial movements through smartphone apps, or celebrate solstices and equinoxes. Modern space exploration and satellite navigation systems rest upon foundations established by those who marked celestial patterns in clay tablets, stone monuments, and papyrus scrolls. Though they knew nothing of black holes or cosmic background radiation, they posed the essential questions that launched humanity's scientific journey. In their quiet vigil beneath the stars, these first scientists documented their celestial queries, enabling future generations to peer deeper not only into space but into our very origins. In 1803, an extraordinary transaction reshaped North America when a fledgling nation, barely out of its 20s, doubled its territory overnight. The Louisiana Purchase wasn't merely a land deal, it was a geopolitical earthquake. With a single signature, the United States acquired over 828,000 square miles from France, spanning from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. This vast, fertile expanse would eventually give rise to 13 states, all for the astonishing price of $15 million, approximately 4 cents per acre. What makes this acquisition even more remarkable is its unexpected nature. Not even the Americans anticipated such an opportunity. President Thomas Jefferson's modest goal was securing access to the Mississippi River and the strategic port of New Orleans, vital lifelines for American commerce. The young republic's heartland farmers depended on river routes to transport goods southward, making whoever controlled New Orleans the gatekeeper of economic survival. Jefferson authorized his diplomats to offer up to $10 million for New Orleans and adjacent territories, nothing more. But upon arriving in Paris, these diplomats received a shocking counter-proposal. Not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana territory. The explanation lay in shifting French priorities under Napoleon Bonaparte. Though he had initially dreamed of establishing a grand North American empire, the Haitian Revolution had devastated French colonial ambitions in the Caribbean. The combined forces of disease, rebellion, and looming conflict with Britain transformed Louisiana from strategic asset to liability. Napoleon needed funds for European wars, not distant territories of swampland and prairie. Seizing this unexpected windfall, American negotiators accepted Napoleon's offer without awaiting Jefferson's full approval. This wasn't merely acquiring a port, it was gaining control of the Mississippi watershed, the fertile Great Plains, passages to the Rocky Mountains, and strategic dominance over the continent's heartland. What Jefferson received wasn't just territory, it was America's destiny materialized, a canvas for westward expansion, national growth, and inevitable conflict. Yet, amid newspaper celebrations and political triumphalism, one crucial reality remained unacknowledged. This land was far from empty. It was home to dozens of native nations, each with established histories, complex alliances, and legitimate territorial claims. A diplomatic transaction in Paris would ultimately transform not just maps and borders, but countless lives across an entire continent. At the epicenter of the Louisiana Purchase stood a crowned tactician with mounting problems, Napoleon Bonaparte. By 1803, the French emperor was fighting simultaneous battles against European powers, Caribbean revolutionaries, and his own depleting treasury. In a decision that astonished contemporaries, he offered to sell 1/3 of North America to the very nation he had previously sought to contain. This dramatic reversal had recent origins. Just years earlier, France had secretly reacquired Louisiana from Spain through the Treaty of San Ildefonso. Napoleon envisioned restoring France's colonial empire, with Louisiana serving as the agricultural backbone for Saint-Domingue, modern Haiti, France's jewel in the Caribbean. The strategy was straightforward. Louisiana would supply wheat, meat, and provisions to fuel Saint-Domingue's lucrative sugar production. France valued Louisiana not for itself, but as support infrastructure for its Caribbean profit engine. This vision collapsed amid revolution and disease. The Haitian Revolution, led by formerly enslaved people under the brilliant leadership of Toussaint Louverture, erupted into full-scale rebellion. France dispatched tens of thousands of troops to suppress the uprising, only to watch them perish by the thousands, not just from combat, but from devastating yellow fever epidemics. Napoleon lost his finest general, his elite forces, and any hope of reclaiming the world's most profitable sugar colony. With Saint-Domingue slipping from French control, Louisiana became not just irrelevant, but indefensible. As Britain prepared for renewed conflict with France, Napoleon feared British forces might seize Louisiana. Rather than lose it in war, he chose to sell it, making a characteristically Napoleonic decision: swift, bold, and ruthlessly pragmatic. On April 11, 1803, Napoleon stunned American envoys Robert Livingston and James Monroe with his comprehensive offer: the entire Louisiana Territory, not just New Orleans, for $15 million. His strategic calculus was clear. I have given England a maritime rival that will sooner or later humble her pride. Beyond immediate financial gain, Napoleon sought to strengthen America as a counterweight against British power. The Louisiana sale wasn't surrender, but strategic repositioning. With this single masterstroke, Napoleon abandoned his American imperial ambitions and forever altered the trajectory of a nation he scarcely respected. What represented a mere strategic adjustment for France became America's springboard for continental dominance and the beginning of the end for native sovereignty across vast western territories. Thomas Jefferson had long championed his vision of an agrarian republican nation of independent farmers tilling their own soil, united through liberty and civic virtue. The Louisiana Purchase should have represented his ideal realized, but instead presented him with a profound constitutional dilemma. Jefferson was a strict constructionist who believed federal powers should be limited to those explicitly enumerated in the Constitution. Yet nowhere did this founding document authorize the government to purchase foreign territory. No clause permitted acquiring a continent. No provision outlined procedures for doubling national territory through a single transaction. Jefferson's hesitation was palpable. Napoleon's offer seemed almost miraculous: $15 million for lands stretching from the Mississippi to the Rockies, a once-in-history opportunity. But could Jefferson, who had built his political identity opposing federal overreach, stretch constitutional boundaries to justify such an enormous acquisition? Privately, he contemplated proposing a constitutional amendment specifically authorizing the purchase, but practical considerations loomed large. Delay risked Napoleon withdrawing the offer, or Britain seizing the territory before negotiations concluded. In a remarkable irony, Jefferson embraced the doctrine of implied powers, the very principle he had vigorously opposed when advocated by his political rival Alexander Hamilton years earlier. Jefferson reframed the purchase as a treaty rather than a land acquisition, since the Constitution explicitly authorized the president to negotiate treaties with Senate approval. The Senate enthusiastically ratified the agreement in October 1803, and Jefferson, despite private misgivings, publicly defended his decision as essential for national security and prosperity. Thus, Jefferson, the constitutional purist, became architect of history's largest peaceful territorial acquisition. His critics immediately identified the contradiction, branding him hypocritical. Jefferson, however, viewed it as pragmatic, compromise-bending constitutional interpretation to preserve rather than endanger the Republic. This precedent established that the federal government could acquire territory through treaties without explicit constitutional authorization. Precedent invoked repeatedly as American expansion continued westward into lands already inhabited by indigenous peoples for countless generations. The Louisiana Purchase had been signed, sealed, and ratified, but a profound mystery awaited what exactly had the United States acquired. This vast territory stretched before them like an uncharted ocean, its contours barely sketched on maps, its interior teeming with unknown waterways, towering mountains, undiscovered species, and numerous indigenous peoples. Recognizing this immense knowledge gap, President Jefferson, in 1804, launched what would become one of history's most legendary journeys, the Course of Discovery. Under the leadership of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, their expedition carried ambitions as expansive as the territory itself. To explore these uncharted lands, forge diplomatic relations with native nations, catalog natural resources, and perhaps most tantalizing of all, discover a navigable water route to the Pacific Ocean. Jefferson's vision included finding this mythical Northwest Passage, a waterway connecting Atlantic to Pacific that would revolutionize global trade. While this particular dream proved illusory, Lewis and Clark's discoveries would nonetheless transform America's perception of its continental destiny. Setting forth from St. Louis in May 1804, their party of more than 30 men ventured upriver into landscapes untouched by American settlement. Their scientific achievements were remarkable, documenting over 100 previously unknown animal species and 178 new plants, meticulously mapping river systems, sketching mountain ranges, and filling journal after journal with detailed scientific and ethnographic observations that would captivate the nation. Yet this monumental journey succeeded not through American ingenuity alone. One figure proved indispensable: Sacagawea, a young Shoshone woman who joined the expedition alongside her French-Canadian husband. Far more than merely a translator, Sacagawea served as a living symbol of peaceful intentions. Her presence, traveling with her infant child, signaled to wary indigenous communities that this was not a military invasion. Her intimate knowledge of landscapes and diplomatic protocols repeatedly saved the expedition during treacherous crossings and delicate tribal negotiations. Spanning more than 2 years and covering an astonishing 8,000 miles, traversed entirely by boat, horseback, and foot, the expedition finally reached the Pacific in November 1805. After wintering in a hastily constructed fort, they completed their return journey by 1806, though they never discovered Jefferson's hoped-for Northwest Passage. They returned with something arguably more valuable: the first comprehensive American account of these vast interior lands and their indigenous inhabitants. Jefferson had purchased an enigma. Lewis and Clark began transforming it into tangible reality. Yet, while their detailed reports kindled dreams of westward expansion, they also foreshadowed something more ominous: mounting pressure against indigenous nations, and an inexorable push toward conquest disguised as discovery. For American politicians and would-be settlers, the Louisiana Purchase represented an unprecedented opportunity virgin territory, awaiting farms, cities, and ambitious development. But for the native nations, who had called these lands home for countless generations, it marked something entirely different: the beginning of erasure. The territory America had purchased from France already housed over 50 sovereign indigenous nations, each possessing distinct languages, territorial boundaries, and governance systems, from the Ojibwe to the Cheyenne, Comanche, and Mandan. These communities had cultivated the land, established complex trade networks, and formed sophisticated alliances long before European flags appeared on the continent. Yet, in Jefferson's vision, and that of subsequent American leaders, the Louisiana Territory appeared as an empty canvas vast, underutilized and primed for American settlement. The indigenous nations received no consultation regarding this monumental transaction, no notification, no compensation. In a single diplomatic stroke, sovereign peoples found themselves reclassified as subjects under an expanding American republic. Jefferson's philosophy offered them stark options: either assimilate into American society or relocate peacefully when possible, forcibly if deemed necessary. His private correspondence revealed his belief that as settlers pushed westward, indigenous peoples would either retreat further west or face extinction, though not yet formally called removal. The ideological foundation was already taking shape. This pressure intensified dramatically after Lewis and Clark returned with reports of abundant resources and fertile lands. The federal government initiated a relentless campaign of treaty negotiations, many deceptive or coercive, designed to appropriate indigenous territories and push tribes ever westward. Some communities faced direct military force. Others succumbed to introduced diseases and systematic displacement. The Louisiana Purchase inaugurated a new phase in American expansionism, manifest destiny before that concept had acquired its name. The conviction that the United States was divinely ordained to control the entire continent found its legal justification in this transaction, while the moral cost accumulated in shattered indigenous lives and stolen ancestral lands. From indigenous perspectives, the Louisiana Purchase represented not a legitimate transaction, but a profound violation. It arbitrarily redrew maps that had never belonged to European powers, erased boundaries never acknowledged by their creators, and unleashed waves of settlers motivated not by trade but by permanent acquisition. And this displacement had only begun. While history books celebrate the Louisiana Purchase as a diplomatic triumph, a peaceful acquisition that nearly doubled American territory, the lived reality proved far more complex and violent. This seemingly clean transaction on parchment unleashed decades of conflict, displacement, and cultural devastation on the ground. As American settlers flooded westward, drawn by promises of fertile farmland, personal autonomy, and economic opportunity, they pushed into territories still inhabited by indigenous nations. The federal government followed in their wake, establishing military outposts, constructing roads, and installing administrative centers to project its newly claimed authority. This expansion created an inevitable collision between fundamentally incompatible worldviews, one that conceptualized land as private property to be claimed, fenced, and improved, versus another that understood land as a living entity to be shared and stewarded across generations. The resulting conflicts erupted predictably. What began as isolated skirmishes escalated into full-scale wars. Treaties were solemnly signed, then systematically violated. The frontier line advanced relentlessly westward, propelled by rifles, railroad tracks, and unquenchable territorial ambition. Yet indigenous nations weren't the only casualties of this expansion. The Louisiana Territory also intensified a moral crisis that would eventually tear the nation apart: slavery. Southern planters immediately recognized these vast new lands as potential plantation territory. Cotton and sugar cultivation flourished in the southern portions, with enslaved labor deemed essential for profitability. This raised an explosive question that would haunt Congress for decades. Would slavery be permitted in these new territories? This fundamental division eventually produced the Missouri Compromise, deepened sectional tensions, and contributed directly to the Civil War. The Louisiana Purchase didn't merely extend America's geographical boundaries, it stretched its constitutional fabric to the breaking point, and the environmental transformation proved equally dramatic. Rivers were dammed, prairies plowed under, and bison herds, once numbering in the tens of millions, pushed to near extinction. This landscape metamorphosis occurred with stunning rapidity. Territories that had evolved through millennia of indigenous fire management, migration patterns, and sustainable stewardship transformed almost overnight into rigid grids of farms, fences, and extractive industries. In acquiring these lands, the United States also inherited responsibility for what it had done, a complex legacy still resonating in contemporary debates over land rights, tribal sovereignty, and historical reparations. The purchase price may have been paid in gold, but the true cost continues accumulating in human and ecological terms. Once the diplomatic formalities concluded, American leaders faced a daunting practical question. How does one govern a territory so vast it defied comprehension? This expanse would eventually encompass all or part of 15 modern states, stretching from Louisiana to Montana, from the Dakotas to Colorado. But in 1803, it remained largely unmapped wilderness, filled with potential but lacking established roads, American settlements, or clearly delineated boundaries. The first priority was systematic surveying, mapping rivers, mountains, and potential settlement areas, eventually establishing property lines. Expeditions led by Lewis and Clark, Zebulon Pike, and others laid this essential groundwork. Following in their wake came cartographers, land speculators, and military engineers, whose maps gradually transformed into county boundaries, reservation borders, and state lines. What had functioned for millennia as an interconnected indigenous landscape was methodically divided into geometric sections. Congress enacted legislation organizing these areas first as military districts, then as formal territories, each administered by federally appointed governors. These administrative units followed the template established by the Northwest Ordinance. Once a territory accumulated sufficient American settlers, it could petition for statehood. Yet these boundaries often reflected political expediency rather than geographical or cultural coherence. The creation of Missouri in 1821, the first state carved from the purchasings, these tensions. Its admission sparked national controversy because Missouri sought to permit slavery within its borders. The resulting Missouri Compromise drew an arbitrary line across the purchase at latitude 36:30. Slavery would be permitted in territories south of this line, prohibited to the north. This single demarcation would poison American politics for decades, as each new territory's status threatened to destabilize the delicate balance between free and slave states. Meanwhile, white settlers poured into these territories, frequently outpacing formal governance structures. They claimed land through various mechanisms: preemption rights, squatting, and increasingly through federally sponsored land grants. Indigenous peoples, even those with existing treaty protections, watched their traditional territories undergo dramatic reclassification, first designated as U.S. territory, then as public land available for settlement, and finally as someone else's private property. As official maps filled with new boundaries and place names, they simultaneously erased indigenous geographies, obliterating native trails, seasonal migration routes, and sacred sites that had oriented life for countless generations. America was forever transformed by this acquisition, as was the wider world. Yet a profound question persists. Was the cost merely financial, or was it, as many would later argue, measured in irreplaceable lives, cultures, and landscapes that could never be reclaimed? The Louisiana Purchase transcended mere real estate transaction. It represented a pivotal moment in history, a fundamental shift in American identity, from a vulnerable coastal republic to an emerging continental power, stretching boldly into the interior. While the ink dried in Paris, the consequences reverberated across prairies, rivers, and generations. For the United States, it unleashed unprecedented possibilities, igniting a new national conviction that expansion was not merely desirable, but inevitable. This belief would gradually crystallize into formal policy, becoming manifest destiny, eventually driving American settlement to the Pacific Ocean and beyond. It also established a template of power built upon territorial acquisition, indigenous displacement, and aggressive development. The West transformed from mystery into target, offering settlers, speculators, and politicians an open invitation to seize opportunity by uprooting what had existed for millennia. For indigenous nations, this transformation proved catastrophic. Lands they had inhabited, traded through, defended, and revered for countless generations suddenly belonged, not to conquering armies they might resist, but to a distant government claiming to have purchased them through legitimate channels. No negotiations occurred, no consent was sought, just arbitrary lines on maps, and an entirely new set of rules governing their ancestral homes. The arrival of American settlers accelerated cycles of violence, forced removals, and cultural devastation. Treaties were signed, then violated. Reservations were established, then reduced. Bison herds were slaughtered, languages suppressed. By the time settlement patterns stabilized, indigenous presence within the Louisiana Territory had been largely confined, silenced, or erased, though never completely extinguished. Yet the purchase's legacy remains multifaceted. The city's economic systems and infrastructure that emerged from this territory helped shape modern America. Its rivers became commercial arteries. Its natural resources fueled industrial growth. Its vast spaces enabled innovation, diversity, and reinvention. But the shadow of that original transaction lingers. The Louisiana Purchase stands today as a profound paradox simultaneously, a diplomatic triumph and a blueprint for displacement, a story of growth intertwined with grief, of ambition inseparable from amnesia. It made the United States what it is, but also forced a reckoning that continues into the present. How does a nation celebrate acquiring lands it never truly requested permission for and can never rightfully return? While feudal Japan offered undeniable beauty, mortality remained an integral design element. Modern perspectives encourage pursuing dreams, embracing authenticity, and living without regret. But in feudal Japan, one simply lived as fate and social station demanded, no more, no less. And now, gentle listeners, as our journey through feudal Japan comes to a close, I hope these tales of rigid social structures and demanding daily life have gently guided you toward peaceful slumber. May your dreams be far more forgiving than the realities of those who walked these ancient paths. Until our next historical voyage, rest well, knowing your pillow is softer, your water warmer, and your societal expectations considerably less lethal than those we've explored tonight. Sleep peacefully, dear friends, wherever in this modern world you may be.